Hi everyone, I am Anis. Today I will talk about unemployment. Unemployment is defined as a situation where someone of working age is not able to get a job but would like to be in full-time employment. First is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment happens when the skill set of a worker does not match the skill demanded by the jobs available. Third is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is the variation in the number of unemployed workers over the course of economic upturns and downturns. Unemployment can be measured by using unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is the percentage people in the labor force who are unemployed. Unemployment rate is calculated by dividing the number of unemployed people by the total labor force times 100%. Unemployment rate during January 2021 stood at 4.9% with 782.5 thousand of unemployed person. During January 2022, the unemployment rate dropped to 4.2% with 680.5 thousand unemployed person. The government of Malaysia had made decision to implement a lockdown through a nationwide movement control order. Following the rising number of COVID-19 cases, only 5 essential economic sectors are allowed to operate. The closure of business and firms are the main factor that leads to the higher unemployment rate. The effect of unemployment on individual and society are loss of income, loss of job skills, and social and political problems. The effect of unemployment on economy are decrease in import and export, decrease on economic growth, and possibility of economic recession.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Ifa, and in this video I will talk about inflation.
So, what is inflation? Inflation is a general increase in the level of prices of the goods and services in an economy that households buy, such as food, clothing, housing, recreation, transportation, consumer staples, and so on. It measures the average price change in a basket of commodities and services over time. The opposite and rare fall in the price index of this basket of items is called deflation. What are the main causes of inflation? Inflation is caused by multiple factors. Here are a few. First, high demand and low production or supply of multiple commodities. Second, increased demand. And lastly, excess circulation of money. Next, what are the effects of inflation? When there is inflation in the country, the purchasing power of people decreases as the prices of commodities and services are high. The value of currency unit decreases, which impact the cost of living in the country. When the rate of inflation is high, the cost of living also increase, which lead to a deceleration in economic growth. Is inflation bad for everyone? Inflation is perceived differently by everyone depending upon the kind of asset they possess. Example, for someone with investment in real estate or stock commodities, inflation means that the prices of their asset are set for high. But for those who possess cash, they may be adversely affected by inflation as the value of their cash erodes. How to calculate the inflation rate? First, we need to know that inflation rate is measured in percentage and can be calculated by using this formula. Inflation rate equal to CPI current year minus CPI previous year over CPI previous year times 100%. Inflation in Malaysia is usually calculated in the Consumer Price Index or CPI, which is calculated each month by the Bureau of Labour Statistics. So, this is the analysis of Annual Consumer Price Index 2021 that we get from Department of Statistics Malaysia. From the infographic and chart 1, we can see that the inflation rate increased significantly to 2.5% as compared to 2020 negative 1.2%. It is caused from the implementation of Movement Control Order 2.0 and 3.0 in early and mid-2021. Table 1 shows the inflation for subgroup of food and beverage. In 2021, a subgroup of food and beverage recorded increase between 0.3% to 3.3%. The subgroup of oil and fats was the main contributor to the increase of this group, which inclined of 3.3%. Then it followed by meat, fish and seafood, milk, cheese and egg, food product not as well classified, and vegetable. chart 3 shows the inflation by state in Malaysia. In 2021, all states registered increase in inflation, while 7 states show increase which surpassed the national inflation level of 2.5%. The highest increase was recorded by Terengganu. Meanwhile, Wilayah Persekutuan Kuala Lumpur and Sabah dan Wilayah Persekutuan Labuan were the two states with the lowest increase.
Hello everyone, I'm Siti Nabila binti Osman. Now I will talk about gross domestic products. So what is GDP? GDP is the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. Component in GDP. C refer to the largest part have in GDP. I refer to total investment in capital by private sector. G refer to includes expenditures by federal, state and local government, and net export refer to difference between exports and imports. Types of GDP. Nominal GDP measured in current price, real GDP constant at normal price, and GDP deflator measure of the overall price level is changing. GDP revenue and expenditure considered and counted for all people in the country of the income must derive in Malaysia. GDP will be calculated only on the basis of income and expenditure. Where component of GDP come from? Component and GDP come from goods and services produced in a country. Imports product from Singapore, US, China, Japan and India are integrated circuit. For exports, most exported products are electronic and electrical goods, but the highest value is natural gas. How to calculate GDP? There are three principal ways to calculating GDP. First, expenditures approach, Y equal to C plus G plus NS. Second, income approach, and I equal to W plus R plus I and plus PR. Third, GDP deflator. GDP deflator equal to nominal GDP over real GDP times 100%. When GDP is used? We use GDP when country need to measure of well-being of country of international and temporary. In Malaysia, we use when to measure as the sum of all domestic and foreign effective demand for national goods. Domestic demand is attracted not only by national goods but also by imports. An increase of effective demand will increase GDP. GDP interact to determine the aggregate. When GDP have changed, it must have effects on specific markets. GDP never be same level year after year. The most common GDP trend is continued growth with periods of acceleration and deceleration. In Malaysia, why GDP is important? Because it is a leading indicator of a country's economic health. When a country is healthy, unemployment is low and wages increase, while when in a bad condition, a significant change in GDP. Here is GDP in Malaysia from 2019 until 2022. We can notice that GDP in Malaysia are not good condition lately. In 2020, GDP is dropped because we have faced pandemic COVID-19 and today we are still struggling with it. Based on figure 1, gross domestic product will increase when curve demand of consumption, investment and net export increase. Based on figure 2, gross domestic product will decrease when curve demand of consumption, investment, government and net export decrease.
Hi, my name is Nur Fatina binti Udin and today I will present about economic growth. What is the economic growth? Economic growth is an increase in the production of economic goods and services compared from one period of time to another. It can be measured in nominal or real, adjusted for inflation term. What is the economic growth rate? Economic growth rate is the percentage change in the value of all of the goods and services produced in a nation during a specific period of time. As compared to an yearly period, it is also used to measure the comparative health of an economy over time. So, we can calculate the economic growth rate using the formula GDP after minus GDP before over the GDP before, where GDP is gross domestic product of nation. What are the 4 factors of economic growth? First, labor. Labor consists of the people who are responsible for the creation of goods and services from beginning to end and the effort they put forth. Second, land. It includes commercial real estate and renewable resources like forests. Third, capital. It includes manufacturing plants, machinery, tool, or any equipment used in the production process. Fourth, entrepreneurship. It includes the visionaries and innovators behind the entire production process. Causes of economic growth. Economic growth is caused by 2 main factors. First, an increase in aggregate demand, which is AD. Second, an increase in aggregate supply, which is productive capacity. In the short term, economic growth is caused by an increase in aggregate demand, which is AD. If there is a spare capacity in the economy, then an increase in AD will cause a higher level of real GDP. There are four importance of economic growth. First, increase productive capacity. Second, reduce unemployment. Third, higher tax revenue. And fourth, business retention and expansion. What are the current developments in economic growth in Malaysia? Here is the example of real GDP growth. As we can see from the graph, our real GDP growth is very challenging. So for monthly real GDP growth starting from October 2021 until March 2022, there has been a good increase in real GDP growth after pandemic. Noted that the Malaysian economy registered a stronger growth of 5%.
Hi, my name is Nurain Ayuni binti Muhammad Rizwan and my metric number is S58544. Now, I'm going to talk about recession. Now, the topics that I'm going to talk about is, firstly, what is recession? Secondly, why the recession happens? Thirdly, what are the effects of recession? And fourthly, how to solve the recession. Since independence, Malaysia has had 3 periods of major economic shocks. It is worth noting that the causes of each crisis were very different in nature, given that the country was at different developmental stages over the last 4 decades. Malaysia fell into a recession in 1985 with its gross domestic product, GDP, contracting 1% that year. The unemployment rate rose to 5.6% in 1985 and 7.4% in 1986. The non-performing loan (NPL) ratios of commercial banks hit a high of 30% in 1987 and 1988. According to the latest publications and news, the majority of the experts argue that coronavirus slows down the economy, the consumption falls, and the most of the industries face a recession. So, what is recession? Recession is defined as a decline in economic growth. An economic recession is classified as 2 consecutive quarters of economic decline. The main contributory factor of a recession is a decline in demand. This may be from consumers, businesses, government, or internationally through lower exports. During a recession, people lose their jobs, businesses go bust, stock market tumble, and exchange rates tend to decline. A recession may happen due to a decline in one component, 2 components, or all 4 components of GDP. However, what are the factors that would cause this to happen and cause a recession? The recession happened because of pandemic, deflation, business or consumer confidence, and higher interest rates. The first one is pandemic. In 2020, COVID-19 hit the entire global economy. It forced developed nations to completely close down their entire economies and led to one of the worst recessions ever recorded. Even when economies reopened, consumers were still reluctant to go back to restaurants, cinemas, and other stores in fear. The resulting consequence was a prolonged recession as consumers lost their jobs and were reluctant to spend. Secondly, deflation. Falling prices mean consumers push their purchasing decisions back. Instead of paying 15,000 ringgit for a car today, it is better to wait and buy it for 14,000 ringgit next year. In turn, that reduces consumer spending and thereby wider economic activity. At the same time, it incentivizes consumers to save because their money will be worth more each year. A reluctance from consumers to spend due to a deflation can therefore cause a recession. This is because consumer spending is a key part of the economy. In turn, it can also affect business investment as businesses may look to reduce the number of workers due to lower levels of demand. Next, business or consumer confidence. Business confidence can decline due to government policies, declining consumer spending, or increase in interest rates, among others. This decline in confidence impacts on investment, one component of GDP, as businesses worry that it may not produce a suitable return. Lastly, higher interest rates. An increase in interest rates puts pressure on households as they pay more in terms of credit and mortgage debt. Effectively, they are paying more money to borrow the same amount. In turn, consumers' disposable incomes declines, meaning they are unable to buy as many goods and services as before. This then impacts the wider economy as demand falls, putting cost pressures onto businesses. On top of that, businesses also face cost pressures as they have to make higher repayments on their existing loans. This often results in large levels of unemployment as firms seek to cut costs, leading to a recession. Many consumers in the economy will go through a recession and not even notice. Life may continue as normal, but there are far-reaching effects that indirectly impact everyone. These impacts may not necessarily occur during a recession, but many years after. So, what is the effect of recession? The effect of recession is budget deficit, companies going out of business, declining real incomes, fall in exchange rate, and lastly, unemployment. There are many ways on how to solve the recession. Firstly, reduce taxes. Secondly, increase in government spending. Thirdly, reduce interest rates. And fourthly, remove regulations.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Izzati binti Muhammad Ruzimi. So today I'm gonna present about interest rate. So what is interest rate? Interest rates are an important indicator of a country's economy since they affect what we have in our bank accounts. Interest rates fluctuate between highs and lows. These fluctuating interest rates have the potential to jumpstart economic development and combat inflation. Now, what are the factors influence the structure of interest rate? There are many factors that influence the structure of interest rate. So here I have mentioned 3 factors, which is first, default risk, second is liquidity risk, and third is tax consideration. For default risk, so when we talk about default, we know that is the ability or the probability that the issuer is unable or unwilling to make interest payment. So in the bond market, if let's say the issuer misses on paying the first coupon at the second or the third coupon subsequent, then they would have been facing a default risk. The next factor is liquidity. When we talk about the liquidity is how fast or how easy the bond can be converted back to cash or the papers can be converted back to cash, or in other words, how easy for you to sell it in open market if you have bought a bond. The last factor is income tax consideration. They have given the example of interest payments on municipal bond versus the federal income tax. What is the issue that related with interest rate? On 11th of May 2022, Malaysia's central bank unexpectedly raised its benchmark interest rate from an historic low to cool inflationary pressures as the Southeast Asian country continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Bank Negara Malaysia, which is BNM, raised its overnight policy rate to 2% from a record low of 1.75% where it has been since July 2020. So, you can see from the graph that from 1 July 2021 until May 2022, the interest rate is stayed as low as 1.75% and totally increased to 2% on 11 May 2022. So, how to calculate interest rates? Naturally, I have a set of formula to teach you how to calculate the interest rate easily. And this is the formula. As you can see, simple interest equals to principal multiplied with interest rate multiplied with time and divided with 100. Therefore, to calculate interest rate, where we take simple interest multiplied 100 divided with principal multiplied with times. Let me show you a simple example on how to calculate interest rate. Let's say you have invested for RM 140 ringgit in account, and after the first year, you receive for RM 4 ringgit 20 cent interest. So what is the value of R, or the rate of interest? Using the given formula, so 4.20 times 100 divide 140 times 1, and the answer that we got is 3. So the interest rate is 3%. So that's all from me and my group. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.